How you doing, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to This and That. I'm your host, Xander, where we're talking about this, that, and everything in between. I got to throw out an apology for the late delay again, but we kind of always got something going on. Today we had issues with getting into TikTok. I don't know what's going on there because TikTok is claiming that there is no reason why we can't get in, but it's not letting me launch the studio. So as we know that as time goes on, we're going to start seeing more and more restrictions with TikTok and its accessibility in the United States. So since we are experiencing some drawbacks with that, we just gotta, adapt to it. I'm gonna try to see if I can get myself a stream key from TikTok after today's show. But in the meantime, I'm gonna try to see what I can do about making sure that I air today's show on TikTok. Probably have to break it up into a bunch of different short videos and throw it up there because, as I said before, I did a short about it once before, and I was like, yep, yep. When they curve you, bro, turn it into a bunch of fucking shorts and upload it and just throw it up there. So that's what we're gonna be doing. Today is we're going to be going into the true history of the holidays, and I did a lot of digging and I actually came across a lot of interesting information. So for those of you that are here on the show, make sure that you guys like and subscribe, make sure that you guys join the membership, and then take a look at this link here. If you got something that you want to say, you guys, you can come onto the show and speak your piece in the comment section, or you can project your comments directly to me by clicking the link, approving the mic, approving the camera. And when you do so, you will be able to say what you got to see in real time, and that will get you up onto the show. You'll be able to see everybody, wave. So ladies, get your hair and nails did before you come up because you will be seen. And I mean, unless you want to turn off your camera, but if you want to at least be heard, you can jump up onto the show. It's always an idea for you guys to come in and show your support. Now, today we're going to be talking about, like I said before, we're going to be talking about that holiday thing. I'm going to start with Halloween because Halloween is the least controversial one, but it is still controversial because, there are a select few people that have come up and said and done some stuff. And that's one of the reasons why we have what we have today for the current holidays. So as I throw out some I told you so's, and as I throw out some, oh, I can't believe that happened, we're going to be able to sit there and discuss the fact that, yeah, the holidays are the way they are. So let's start off with, well, I just want to make sure that you guys remember that we are supposed to tee off at 9 Eastern, 8 Central, 5 Pacific. But since we kind of tee off a little bit late every day of the week, let's go ahead and get the party started. 3 minutes and 18 seconds. All right, I'll remember that for the short videos. Halloween. Apparently, because it's coming up, we've got about 10 days away from Halloween, and Halloween started over 2,000 years ago. Now, the history of Halloween was actually a Celtic festival, not those individuals that are representing Gothic stuff. That's a whole different class of people in modern time. But the Celtic festival of uh, Samahan. Hopefully I said that correctly. For those of you that are from the Celtic heritage, make sure that you jump in and correct me on that. But Samahan is supposed to be the Celtic festival that they celebrated, which was a festival that marked the end of the harvest season, which is ideally the end of fall and the beginning of winter. Okay. Now, this is supposed to occur on the evening of October 31st. So that since the calendar, and we're going to talk about later on in the show, we're going to talk about the origins of the calendar and how things got misconstrued and what we accept today versus the way things used to be back in the day. But after the calendar was established in October 31st, back in like the 1900s, going forward, you're looking at that being the day of Samahan. And during that day, the boundary between the living and the dead was blurred according to the beliefs of the culture back in the Celtic culture back in that day. Now, this allowed the spirits to return to earth And to ward off these spirits, or scare them off, or deter them from engaging you, people would light bonfires and wear costumes. Now, that's where the original concept of Halloween came from, was the idea that this one day out of the year that the living and the dead mesh together. And then this is one of those situations where, to prevent from engaging a already dead person, that you would light fires to scare them off and wear costumes to scare them off. I can only imagine that if I had passed over, or not quite passed over, but was no longer alive, I was a corporeal spirit, for those people who believe in ghosts, and for those people who don't believe in ghosts, but understand the ideology of poltergeist. If you are in between two realms, for just from the philosophical, or higher learning individuals, when you think about the fact that if you're in between two planes, and you are able to see the former plane that you once were on, and now everybody looks like monsters, it's supposed to scare you off. I mean, I can understand where they get that particular ideology from, but that is really where we get the Halloween costumes and the bonfires, because they didn't have light bulbs back in those days, but they had the torches and stuff to that effect, that was widely spread out, that gave us the eerie Halloween look. Now, in the 8th century, Pope Gregory III designated November 1st as All Saints' Day. So the Catholics came in, took over the Celtic tradition, and then turned it into a religious holiday for Catholics. So now that All Saints' Day is November 1st, they incorporated some of those traditions from Samahan into the All Saints tradition. And that's where the evening before All Saints' Day became known as All Hallows Eve. And that is what led to our current understanding now of Halloween. Now, or at least the name. Now, when we start talking about All Hallows Eve, let's kind of segue off and start talking about that, because you have the All Hallow Tide is a 3-day observation in Western Christianity that includes Halloween, which is the eve, the All Hallows Eve, which is October 31st, All Saints Day, which is All Hallows Day on November 1st, and then All Souls Day, which is November 2nd. Okay, so this is one of the things that's funny about that, because All Hallow Tide requires, and this is one of those things that's also rooted in the ancient Celtic festivals of Samahan, but it's a corporation of both Samahan and Christianity. And this is supposed to be a time to remember the dead, including the martyrs and saints, and all faithful departed Christians. So that's when it was all brought together. So originally, the Celtic people were supposed to be just remembering the dead. The Christian took it over and said, "Oh well, let's remember the martyrs and the saints and all of the people who are faithful and devoted to the Christian God." Turned it all into something different. Real quick though, during this particular time frame, there was a tradition called souling. And souling was supposed to be going door to door asking for soul cakes in exchange for prayers for the dead. So you were supposed to light the candles on the graves, and then you were supposed to abstain from meat on All Hallows Eve, and attend church services. And this is supposed to be a religious practice. Now, that is going to really revolutionize into the practices of Halloween, because you have the attending church services turning into the Halloween parties. You have the abstaining from meats as only eating candy, and you have the lighting candles on graves, to stemming from the torches that was utilized from the Celtic rituals to ward off the dead, to now you have the Halloween lights, the orange lights, the other illuminescence throughout the city that is utilized to represent the ideologies of Halloween. Now, the modern observance of this particular practice is some churches are still celebrating all 3 days, where All Saints Day remains a holy day of obligation in many Catholic countries, not the Christian ones, and Halloween became largely securely maintained a dominant place in most cultures. Now, the cultural significance is going to represent the Christians' adaptation of pagan harvest festivals, and this is what happens with colonism: is that the traditions of the most valued traditions in that time period during colonizations typically gets incorporated by not only the colonized culture but also the colonizing culture. This would be a form of appropriation. So when me and Mr. Pibbs were having that argument about appropriation, when the Christian religion adopted the pagan harvest festival traditions, that was appropriation. And then it modified itself over the years. Now, the reflected beliefs about the relationship between the living and the dead is common. The only difference between the two is that the pagan holiday is reflecting the dead as the dead, just people who died. It doesn't matter if they're good or bad. They don't have to be Christians or not. It's just if you died, we pay your respects because you lived at one point in time. In the Christian religion, it's more so that they only respected the dead that was faithful to the Lord, and then they also paid respects to their recognized religious saints and their martyrs. And you got to think back in those days where people who died for the sake of the cross, those were considered martyrs back in those days. So anybody who gave their life for the church would be respected in that particular time frame. Now that is gonna lead us back to, because I'm gonna be talking about some really deep stuff. That's gonna lead us back to the other areas of Halloween, because as the Irish immigrants brought their customs to the America colonies in the 19th century, Halloween began to take more of a community oriented character. So instead of it being just amongst the family, where you see the same in Mexico, where the families go and pay tribute to their lineage. You see this in China, Japan, and Asia, areas of Asia, where they pay respects to the dead just because they're dead and their family, not specifically because they're somebody famous or somebody of a specific religious descent. It's just because that individual actually once lived and is now dead and is still respected by the family that is remembering them. Now, with Halloween becoming more of a community based thing with the Irish situation, you have activities like trick or treating and costume parties that became more popular. And this became the roots that actually trace it all the way back to the practice of souling, but the trick or treating and costume parties came from uh, a different atmosphere, because the souling was people going door to door asking for food in exchange for prayers for the dead. Trick or treating is a little bit more of a diabolical perspective that was like give me candy or else kind of situation. Give me a snack or else. So uh where souling was, if you contribute to our ability to pray, we'll pray for your family, blah blah blah. That makes sense, because if you think about way back in the day, because today's modern churches are not the same as back in the day when with the ones that they're talking about in the book, uh, because back in those days the church didn't work. The people in the church didn't work. They did not have and income. So their ability to feed themselves and clothe themselves and provide themselves with shelter came from the community that they catered to. The church was the servant of the community, as well as claiming to be a servant of the Lord. There was a servant of the community. So the people who did the sacrifices and slaughtered the cattle, and you put the sins into the cattle, not in that order, in order to absolve yourselves of sin, and then they would have to butcher the cattle after the sacrifices were made, and then bring the butcher cattle to the meat market and sell it in the meat market, and then they would have to clean up the sacrifice situation. Then they'd have to raise more cattle so that they could do it again for the next sacrifice. And the fact that they were having these sacrifices on a regular basis, that they basically worked for the sake of allegedly your soul, right? Now, that meant that their compensation was supposed to be 10% of your contributions to the church, which didn't necessarily have to be money. You brought them food, you brought them clothes, the church was a storehouse. So the church was supposed to be like a warehouse where you just keep all of the stuff. The church wasn't a mandatory place to worship. You worshiped wherever there were two or more people in the name of Jesus, but you went to the storehouse and put all the stuff. The church would keep all of the stuff that was put into the storehouse and distribute it to the people who needed it. So they would get some because they're taking care of the community with the church, and then they would give the rest to the community. That's why the poor and the sick and the homeless would go to the church, because that's where all the resources were supposed to be. It's not like that today. But the fact that they're going door to door and they're saying, hey, give me a bite to eat, and I'll pray for your family members, your former family members, or deceased family members. That was the exchange. Feed me and I pray for you. That makes sense. But leading up to the trick or treat part, we have in their culture, from the Irish immigrants that came to the United States, in their culture, they had the jack-o'-lantern situation that actually was a practice that started with carving vegetables that um, had existed for thousands of years before the Irish people came over to the country. They started carving um, so this was an Irish tradition that Irish used to do, because they somewhat of the same thing. They would do the jack-o'-lantern paying tribute to Jack. I'm about to tell you about Jack. Stingy Jack is what he was called. But they have the culture where they carve into the vegetables, where they would celebrate the holiday that way. Now, when they came to America, it kind of changed. But before we get there, we're looking at this also associated with the Celtic festival of Samhain, where they were marking the end of the harvest festival. And in this scenario, they start carving the faces into now pumpkins when they came to America. So instead of, and they did this during the potato famine. So let me pause for a second and talk about Stingy Jack, so that way we can understand why are we even carving stuff into things. Stingy Jack was named Jack, and the Jack-o'-lantern is coming from the Irish folktale about a man nicknamed Stingy Jack who repeatedly tricked the devil. That's where trick-or-treating really starts, because trick-or-treating was stemming from the tradition of replicating Stingy Jack, where you would repeatedly trick people, right? Now, after Jack's death, he was forced to roam the earth with a lump of burning coal in a carved out turnip to light his way. So you would see that back in the day, before they had the pumpkin, they actually would carve a turnip and then stick a light into it and light up the turnip. So turnips were pretty big, or candles were pretty small, but one way or another, they were teeing off with the jack-o'-lantern. Now, this is where things get a little bit interesting. Because the Irish people originally used turnips, rutabagas, potatoes, and beets when they came over here to America, they were using this to ward off the evil spirits the same way the other pagan religions were using the masks and the flaming torches to ward off evil spirits. And that's the same thing as the church that was utilizing the worshiping of faith to ward off the evil spirits. So everybody just put all their stuff together to ward off these evil spirits. Now, the connection is igneous fatus, and the term jack-o'-lantern was also associated with the natural phenomenon of marsh gas ignition, known as igneous fatus or false fire. And that I would have to go into physics to talk about marsh gas ignition. But the fact is that when they brought the tradition over in the 19th century, during the Great Potato Famine, when everybody, and this was 1840 when they started doing this, they found that the native pumpkins in America were larger and easier to carve than the turnips that they used to use back in Ireland. So they started carving into the pumpkins different designs, sometimes a face, and then they would put inside the face the little candle that we now have as jack-o'-lanterns. We went from drawing a scary face, which is a jagged edge face guy that looks like Jack from I forgot the name of the little little movie there. But he's coming back because you know how Disney does it. They put him in the vault, then they bring him out when everybody is looking for him, and then they put him back in the vault so that you miss him. But they carved the face out of the pumpkin. They used to have the skeleton looking face. I don't know why they don't just call them Skeletor, but they have the skeleton looking face carved into the pumpkin. Nowadays, you have all kinds of nifty designs, not just a face where they carve out eyes, noses, and mouths for the jack-o'-lantern. But it's amazing how they changed from carving into turnips and lighting torches, and paying respects to the dead, to tricking each other. And then this is the funny part, because really Halloween kind of trickled down from Canada, because in Canada is the first recognition of things like trick or treat and things like the identification of Halloween. But this is one of the things where you have Scotland and Ireland. When they came down, there was a thing called guising. This is also part of trick-or-treating, so pay attention to this part. Guising was where the kids would dress up in costumes, they would visit people's homes, and then they would offer entertainment in exchange for food and money. So the church was going to people's houses and saying, hey, feed me, I'll pray for you. The kids were going to people's houses and say, I'll entertain you, give me some food or some money. Now, also, you still had the fact that Jack, the tradition of Jack from Ireland, was to trick people, and that in combination with I'll entertain you for food and money, I'll do a trick for you, or for food or money, and then it kind of became I will prank you if you don't give me food or money. And that's where trick or treat comes from, because now the idea is that you have, in the 1920s, they decided, first came out in Canadian newspapers and started becoming a widely known practice in the 1930s and 1940s. They said, well, to minimize the pranking and mischievous behavior of people in costumes wandering around tormenting their neighbors, the popularity gained that family-friendly ways to celebrate Halloween would discourage the pranking by saying, in exchange for getting a treat, you will not prank me. So I will bribe you with food and or money so that you do not TP my tree in my front yard, or hit me with eggs, or whatever it is that you decide that you're going to do as a prank. Now, the jack-o'-lantern pranking the devil thing, which I guess I could see why the Christians would adopt that, because anybody who's doing anything to the person that the church claims is the worst being in existence, they're going to be like, yeah, I like that. So taking it in, the Christian religion took in the holidays when it came down to celebrating Halloween. Now, this is funny though. The one of the things that I thought about with this was, those people who say that they don't celebrate Halloween because they're either Catholic or Christian. According to the Catholic and Christian history, the Catholics and the Christians both adopted Halloween and actually celebrate the holiday because they represent the Holy Spirits. They don't actually worship the devil. So those people who come through Christian beliefs, claiming that Halloween is a satanic holiday that pays tribute to evil demonic spirits, that is the furthest thing from the truth. Actually, the Halloween is only supposed to worship the lost souls and the righteous and martyred people that actually pay tribute and sacrifice themselves for the church. So really, one of the best days to pay tribute to Jesus, who died on the cross for the Christian religion, according to Christian stories, would be Jesus's day. not necessarily his birthday, but Halloween would be like that day because you're like, hey, he died for our sins. Halloween, So I don't know why anybody. It's rare to see, but anybody who dresses up as Jesus Christ for Halloween, you'd be hitting a nail on the head, bro, because that's where the history comes from. Because if you're idolizing martyrs and anyone with faith in Christ, or Jesus, then if you dress up as Jesus for Halloween, he died for that belief, which makes him a martyr, which makes him a faithful man to the cross, which means that you're supposed to pay homage to him on the 31st, the 1st, and the 2nd. So technically, we should not be tripping about Jesus during Christmas. We should be tripping about Jesus in October, according to the Christians adopting all of this stuff into their religion. Now, it took me 13 blocks to go around the block to come back to this, but this I had to bring this all the way back around so that we could kind of understand what was going on. And the funny thing is that in these practices, the participants usually initially practice by poor adults and children. So word to those of us that are in the middle and lower class American culture, only the poor kids participate in Halloween historically, and later primarily carried out to only by children. And that's why Halloween is considered a children's holiday. But it started as just the poor people going to the rich people or middle class people's houses and begging for food and money, and I'll do a little dance for you, and then if you didn't give me anything, then I would egg your house or prank your house or torch something or do something ridiculous in order to get you to give me something, which is there are some terms for that, but I'm not going to use them because then they're not going to air the show. But I just thought that was interesting to talk about. And they have this thing called soul cakes, and they're small round cakes. They look like Reese's Pieces with sweet pieces in them, and they resembled shortbread biscuits, like Halloween looking Reese's Pieces. So for those of you that are looking at the candy corn, that's not what it's supposed to look like. It's supposed to look like a Reese's peanut butter cup with a pumpkin in the middle, because that's what it looked like, a shortbread biscuit with sweet spices on it. Then they often marked it with a cross on top of it. Man, you're going to get a pumpkin this year. You're not getting a cross on top of it. Then they represented a soul being freed from purgatory when eaten. Y'all letting so many people go just by eating 1,000 bags of candy. Y'all letting so many people go. So the practice of trick-or-treating, partying, singing, and dancing, when you start including the receiving of the soul cakes, which is the treats, the candies, and everything that we're using right now, food, which is the Halloween dinners at the parties, drinks, and money, you start having what we have today with the scantily clad women dressing up as all of the sexy Halloween characters, the overly sexualized Halloween characters, and then the men always trying to be their favorite Marvel superhero or Disney classic superhero, and then the kids, let's be something scary. Now, in the 1800s, children began wearing costumes while souling, and that's going to be another thing that led to the development of the trick-or-treat part, because kids wear costumes, they do a little dance, they get them some snacks, and have them a good time. This spread through the planet in England, and particularly in the North and the Western cultures, and also practice in Wales with counterparts in Portugal and the Philippines. So you can actually go to different areas of the world and still see the same Americanized Halloween that you see here in the United States. And the legacy continued into why can't I join? Because Clips, I have seen that name before, and I know that you are not 18. Clips, I gotta put you in there at 18 or older, buddy. That's how it works. You're telling me to let you in. No, Sonny. No, 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 no. You get on the live if you're over the age of 18. Now, if your dad was here, I would talk to your dad. If Joe, where's Joe? That was my son. Well, uh, unfortunately, I can't see your face, Joe. Well, no, that's not Joe. That's Joe's son. Because Joe showed his face. So the screen is blacked out. So that means that you are up to something. And with Halloween is the time to trick people because I'm not giving you a treat outside of giving you the history of Halloween. He's mowing to Skeebit. That's fine. Well, once I can see your face and I can throw you up there, when I see Joe, I'll be able to throw Joe on, and Joe can give me a what's up. He can say what's up and shout out to his family. Joe's always welcome to the show, but unfortunately, Joe's son is not even 15, so I can't put Joe's son up there. So clips when I see Joe, I'll put Joe on the show. But that's the only requirement on this show is that you gotta be over the age of 18 to jump onto the show. But you can participate, you can listen, you can comment. I'm only gonna put up the appropriate comments that you put up on in the comment section. But yeah, that doesn't matter. I mean, that's only really gonna bother Joe if the Republican Party becomes in office. And then Ohio. So everybody's joining now. So not your whole squad. Where's HD He? Have him jump in. Have him jump in as well. Oh, that's not relevant. That question. I'm not even going to repeat that question. That is not relevant at all because right now we're actually talking about Halloween, and we're talking about where Halloween came from and the origins of it, and how it has drastically changed. But wrapping up the Halloween discussion of things, we were talking about how it was incorporated by Christians where they appropriated pagan harvest festivals. They appropriated the Irish and the um, Scottish traditions, and they made the trick or treating that we have right now based on bringing everybody else's traditions into one. So we are going to now talk about Christmas, but hold on a second. Let's see what he's got to say. Uh, okay, so you are asking me, what do I think about the rights for the LGBTQ community? Well, in the freest country in the world, I believe that those individuals who have the freedom to say and do whatever they want to say and do, as long as whatever they're doing does not negatively impact somebody else or somebody else's stuff, I'm going to say that you should have the same rights to exist that I do when it comes down to how do I feel about those individuals. My observation on public displays of behavior is being a parent that if you are doing this, if you're doing your public displays outside of the sight of underage individuals that are not old enough to know what's going on, I would not have a problem with that either. But if you're going to have, but I also have to recognize that public displays of affection appropriately, regardless of your preferences, should still be allowed. It's just that the inappropriate behavior, even if you have a heterosexual relationship, the inappropriate public public displays of affection should be kind of reduced. So when you have in Eastern cultures where people do not display affection publicly, heterosexual or homosexual relationships, they do not display affections appropriately. They for the most part barely hold hands. They might hug, but there's no kissing, there's no tongue, no nothing like that going on there. And that's one of the reasons why I think that is a more effective way to go when you start talking about conservatism, but that's more of a Republican platform. The liberal is like, hey, if you guys want to act inappropriate on top of a countertop in the middle of a Chipotle, do you, as long as you don't mess up anything. So he says, I'm going to tell you a Halloween song. Yeah, we're not doing Halloween songs right now. We're just talking about it. We're about to start talking about Christmas. Christmas is going to get controversial. He says, spooky, scary. Yeah, since Rizzler's done your, yeah, and if you could, yeah. Okay, that's a very interesting song, but I'm not going to put that out there. Do you know what Mr. Beast Brewing Machine is? I do not know what Mr. Beast Brewing Machine is. What is that, Clips? And then I'm going to go ahead and start swinging in on Christmas, because Christmas is like an uppercut and a half, because I did say that Christmas is not what we thought it was, but I had some incorrect notions, but I had some spot on notions as well. So right before I start, it's how you watch John. Nah, because you're talking about that. That's not even John Wick though. That's not even John Wick. What are my thoughts on Andrew Tate? Well, I can tell you that he is utilizing his freedom of speech. And you have to understand that while we do have an alleged freedom of speech, we also have censorship. And since we have censorship on top of our freedom of speech, we have the right to say whatever we want to say, but they have the right to not broadcast it. So some podcasts that say things that are age restrictive, where certain things should not be said to minors or said in front of minors, will put you in a position where your show will not be widely broadcast to all ages. And then when they put your show into a restricted class, you get less viewership. And that's widely because underage individuals like yourselves have accessibility to cell phones, and you have accessibility to the internet because your parents did not put parental restrictions on your devices. Had they put parental restrictions on your devices, you would have never known that this show existed, because 90% of the shows that are aired by this are adult only content because of conversations like this. So he I could put this up. I can put this up. He says, I hate censorship. I hate censorship too. But because there's censorship, in order for me to have a publicly funded platform, I have to adhere to the censorship. Now, funny thing, if you really wanted to be on the show in an inappropriate fashion, you would have paid for the private show where you would be on the show doing whatever you wanted to do, because as long as you maintain the guidelines where you're not doing any, you're not showing any inappropriate actions or body stuff, then your comments and clowning and jokes and moo cow and all this other stuff would be on the members only dark show, where the only people that would see it are the people who paid for it. That wouldn't be a problem, and the cheapest membership that we have is like $3.99, I think, or $2.99, where you would pay $3 a month to clown when it is a censored show. And I mean, I know you get more of an allowance than that. You could probably pay $20 a month and then be able to do a shout out to some of your homeboys that are probably in your middle school, and get all your homeboys to jump up on the show and say and do all kinds of inappropriate whatever's on the private channel. But this is supposed to be 18 and over for the public, so I'm sorry, I gotta tell you, kind of can't mess with that. He Oh, I remember that joke. He's talking about, yeah. And then he's asking me what's my thoughts on Elon Musk. So what are my thoughts on Elon Musk? That is a appropriate question to ask. So thoughts on Elon Musk is he did a good job with those robots. He was the first one to come out with them. They have a company that's been working on it probably longer than him, and he came out with some that are pretty much good to go right now. They're not really cheap, but they are reasonably affordable. Um, um, the electric car that he put out is really good car to have if you wanted to start up a business or if you just didn't want to drive. The self-driving car that he made is equivalent to the self-driving car that Rolls-Royce made, but Rolls-Royce made their car at well over $500,000. Elon Musk made his autopilot car at 30 grand. So if you have 30 grand, or if you have accessibility to get a loan reasonably towards 30 grand, you would be able to get you a self-driving car that you could potentially rent out, and then you would be able to make some money off of that. And if you capitalized on them, like there was a thing I seen on YouTube where an individual was buying his car from the bank, well, from the dealership, and then refinancing it through his bank, so he had 90 days no payments. And then each time he does that, it shows that he paid off a 30, 40, $50,000 debt, and then he still has to finance, which actually helps him out a little bit more with improving his credit, because if he's paying off 30, 50, $90,000 vehicles, uh, 2, 3 times a year, it's showing that he has a good payment history, which actually qualifies him for higher credit lines, which actually qualifies him to purchase more expensive vehicles, because regardless of what the payments are, he's able to pay the payments off and then refinance them. So that's a pretty nifty trick, which actually makes you more pleasantly approved by dealerships. But just utilizing that particular type of strategy allows you to be able to buy 5, 10, 15 of those self-driving cars, put 7 of them out there at a time as taxi drivers, like with Uber or Lyft, and then have the people driven by the car. They're taken to where they want to go, and then drop them off, and then you come back, or just do your own rental car thing where you do the self-driving car and put it up on Auto Trader or something like that. Is the one where they rent the car the way they rent the Cybertruck, and then the car picks them up, takes them where they want to go, and then you bring it back. And you can make a decent quantity of cash on that as well. So you could really start up a business doing that, and then all the profits that you get are written off on your taxes, because uh, you would be buying $30,000 cars and making 20, 30,000. Well, you'd be making 20 or 30,000 a year off of each car, which means that you would be getting a 100% deduction, because anything over 20% for a business, for a C corporation, or anything over 35 to 40% for a LLC, you're not paying taxes on it, on any money that you make. So if you buy 5 or 10 self-driving cars and put them out 5 at a time, and have them work half the day or work for 100 out of 300 miles, and then bring them back to the house, plug them in, and release the other models, then you can rotate out your electric cars, make sure that you've got electric cars always on charge, and make sure that you got electric cars always on the go, and you could have round the clock personalized cab business. You would have to pay for commercial insurance for transportation vehicles, which is going to give you like $3,500 a month for insurance per vehicle. So that's going to stack up. If you started off with regular insurance on the vehicles, and then just add all of these vehicles to it, you would be able to blow yourself up, and then you can make you a bunch of money. So at your current age, if you take this advice, talk to your homeboys about it, you guys could try to find a way to, by the time that you're 18, you guys would have 15 of these cars under your belt, and each one of y'all would be making 100 to 50 $150,000 a month on renting out your car, and you would still have your own car to take you where you want to go. Keep in mind, with the laws that exist in this country right now, you can only get a DUI if there is a steering wheel for you to drive the car. So you could actually get wasted and then lay in the back seat of the car and have the car take you home, because you're not driving. So you can never get a DUI when you're not driving. They can't give you it, even if the engine is running. If you're not driving, if you're not able to operate the vehicle, you cannot get a DUI. You can get a traffic ticket, you can get a speeding ticket, because the owner of the vehicle gets ticketed for moving violations, but you yourself cannot get a citation for operating under the influence of anything, because you are not operating the vehicle operates itself. So just take all of that stuff into consideration when you guys are thinking about those electric vehicles. So he's asking about what state am I broadcasting from? Denver. And then what about Joe Rogan? So this was his question, y'all. He asked what state are we broadcasting from? Denver. And how long did it take you? That is an interesting question. And then he could skip down to what are my thoughts on him and his? Oh yeah, we already had this question before. They asked me what was my thoughts on what happened in Diddy's house, and I can tell you right now, hey, rich people have all kinds of interesting. Um, oh, you have a question up there. The OF question, yeah, if the Republicans get into office, OF is going to be offline. So there's that answer. And then when you say, "Oh, you're," oh no, you're making the OF comment too. When I said if you pay for the membership, you could act reckless. No, you can make stupid comments and you can clown around, but it still has to be appropriate. So no, it is not going to be OF style. No, there is going to be no OF content on this podcast. And then you're back to your Diddy situation. They whatever they decide to do with him, they're it doesn't bother me because I mean, rich people do all kinds of wild stuff the same way the poor people do all kinds of wild stuff. It's just nobody talks about what the poor people do. The difference is now when it comes down to the kids being involved, kind of got a problem with that. But you got those boys in Polk County that's working at Disneyland, and they're meeting up in hotels and stuff in Polk County, and Disneyland is in Orlando. And if you're not from Florida, Polk County and Disney World are not in the same place at the same time. So you're not really going to see uh you're not really going to see anybody commuting 2,000 miles or more to go and act inappropriate, but they're commuting and leaving their kids in a hotel and going out there getting into a bunch of trouble, and the Polk County Sheriff's Department's got to kick doors in, and everybody gets arrested, and now you're looking at 10, 15, 20 years in jail, just like Diddy's got 30 years plus one, and I don't think they're going to let him go on that. They're going to make an example out of him. I feel like the bigger the party, the more trouble you can get yourself into, because people talk. You do not want to do anything at your house. If you are going to do something that you got no business doing, you do it away from your house. What I would have done, these are multimillionaires, buy a private island. It's exclusive. You got to catch a boat there. And if you're in international waters, yeah, you're dealing with federal laws, but the only people who can really do anything about it are the people who come off of the island. So you go to the private island. What happens on the island should inherently stay on the island. So that would be my expectation of things. And then when it comes down to what you got going on at your own individual house, you ain't got nothing going on at your own individual house. So the average day-to-day person comes to the house. The people that want the reckless behavior go to the island. And you're not at the island. That way, they can't associate you with island behavior. That would be the most effective way to keep yourself out of trouble. So, back to our story for today. We were supposed to be talking about the holidays and how the holidays change. Christmas. I want to talk to you guys about Christmas. Christmas is something else. So, early Christians celebrated Christmas. This was supposed to be some of the sources say that Christmas was supposed to be celebrated as early as the 2nd century CE. Now, early Christian writers like Hippolytus, 170 to 235 CE, mentioned December 25th as Jesus' birthday. He just mentioned it. He was just like, hypothetically, I just feel like we're just going to make this day Jesus' birthday. That's not Jesus' birthday. But ancient texts like Dasikala, almost like Optimus Prime, 250 CE, which is like 25 years later, and Liber Pontificalis indicating the Christmas celebrations before 336 CE. And you're looking at actually, I'm assuming that the way that they map this out is that CE is supposed to be going backwards from BC, which is weird. Either way, the pagan influenced the winter solstice as the celebration of Christmas. So the winter solstice celebration was a pagan culture, which was again taken by Christianity. Now the Roman festivals like Saturnalia in December 17th to December 24th, and Dies Natalis Solis in Viente, December 25th, had similarities to the Christmas celebrations. And then Germany had Germanic pagan tribes who decorated evergreen trees, a tradition later incorporated into Christmas. So Christmas actually started with people supposedly celebrating Jesus's birthday. It never had anything to do with penguins or polar bears or anything like that. They just threw that crap in there. Santa Claus is a whole nother story. And I kind of talked about Santa Claus the last time we represented this, but Santa Claus was supposed to be this guy with magical powers that can go travel the world instantaneously, dropping off presents at everybody's house. And it's just something about a dude of any gender or race is just breaking into your house and leaving stuff behind. Like, I'm just like, why? And we'll do a whole nother show about that, maybe probably closer to Christmas, because I just kind of feel like it's entertaining to talk about the origins of Santa Claus and the origins of the Grinch. I'll probably talk about that closer to Christmas. Put it on my calendar. But just a holiday in and of itself is what we're talking about today. The Christians appropriated it again, and then the church chose December 25th to celebrate Christ's birthday, and possibly absorbed all of the pagan winter celebrations and all of the Roman and Germanic traditions. So now Christmas is decorating Christmas trees. Christmas is Christmas carols and all this other stuff, but that wasn't what it was originally. Now, the evolution and tradition of this included Christmas having costumes that developed independently of the commemoration of Jesus's birthday. And then some traditions have roots to pre-Christmas festivals, while others develop the Christian context. Now, the pre-Christian festivals were things like help me out, y'all. You have I can't think of it. It's the Jewish holiday, but it'll come to me. They start 12 days ahead, where you get to open one present a day every day until Christmas Day, kind of thing. And I feel like you could kind of just merge all that stuff together, which is pretty much what they did, was appropriate everything. And then hold on, y'all, let's see what he's got to say about this. He says nope, inappropriate, inappropriate, and then inappropriate, and then okay, also. So we're gonna skip those, and then let's see. So the pre-Christmas festivals, Hanukkah, that's what it was. I knew I was gonna remember it. Hanukkah. That's the one with the 12 days of Christmas, where you light a candle and you open a present, and they were little simple presents going all the way up to Christmas Day. So you had Hanukkah and Christmas. So the pre-Christmas festivals and the Christmas festivals. That's what you had. Now, the character of Christmas celebrations had changed over time from raucous medieval festivals to family-oriented celebrations, where it went from the groups celebrating in and of themselves to like people coming together as a family in the 19th century. And then it spread and developed through various cultures as Christianity spread through the culture. So after Christianity took over what the meaning of Christmas was, the same way Christianity took over the meaning of Halloween, it just spread with Christianity across other cultures. So in America, Christmas was initially controversial due to its pagan association, but gradually became widely celebrated in the 19th century. And it was weird because Christianity does not celebrate paganism, but they take paganism celebrations and turn them into Christian celebrations. So when people say, well, I don't celebrate X, Y, and Z because I'm an atheist. Well, pagans celebrate the holidays too. So an atheist can celebrate Halloween, an atheist can celebrate Christmas, and a Christian and Catholic can celebrate Halloween, and a Christian and Catholic can celebrate Christmas. There you go. And so can the Gothic people. So, but one of the things that I wanted to talk about was because they say, well, it's about Jesus's birthday. It's not about Jesus's birthday. It's just a day that you guys decided that Christian and Catholic people decided that this is when we want to have a party. And reason being is because when you talk about the biblical scholars and historians that believe that Jesus was born between 6 BC and 4 BC. And the funny thing about that is I had to do a little bit of research about that because BC, let's start with that. BC stands for before Christ, and it is a calendar designation used to indicate years before, traditionally recognizing the year of the birth of Christ. And in this system, the year is counted backwards from 1 AD is Anno Domini, meaning in the year of our Lord. And BC is going to go from 1 year before Christ, counted backwards to however many years before Christ was born. And the year that he was born is 1 BC, or I guess starting the day after he was born would be 1 AD, and that would be Anno Domini, which is the year of our Lord. So the first year of our Lord is year 1, and then every year after that is AD. So when we are 2024 years after the year, not after his death, it's after the year of his birth. So that's another thing that you have to think about. And because it is used to designate years in the Georgian and Julian calendars, specifically referring to the years following the traditionally reckoned year of his birth of Jesus Christ, the 500 BC refers to a time 500 years before his birth, which is just like when we start talking about 5 million BC, when we talk about the dinosaurs being created, is 5 million years before Christ was born. And that is going to be a hypothetical assumption. We're going to get into that in a second. Let's pause and talk about some of these comments that you guys got in here. He's spelled immigrant semi, and my dad got deported and lied that he was a single, and I felt bad. Should turn myself in and get myself deported. So the only thing that the thing that makes you illegal is not the fact that you came here. The thing that makes you illegal is that after you get here, you refuse to get citizenship. Once they find you here, you can request asylum as soon as they catch you, and then they will give you a certain period of time to acquire your citizenship. If you put forth the effort to acquire your citizenship, even if you got here after they found you, instead of registering to come here before you got here, because the right way to come here with immigration, the same way the right way to go to another country, is to notify that country in advance of your intended arrival, find out all the rules and information respected to their allowance of you coming over. Even if you were a gun-toting American citizen and you wanted to go over there, you could go over there with your gun if you contact their embassy, find out their laws, get gun permits, and then you would be able to carry your gun with you. They would tell you the laws as to how you can carry your gun with you, whether you can carry it on a drop leg open carry, or if it must be concealed carry. But since you would be having a gun permit, you would have enhanced authorization, and usually it requires you to have some kind of gun training. And if you had gun training in America, where you had a gun permit in America, which gives you more rights to carry a gun, but it gives you more responsibilities to notify law enforcement that you have a gun. And then if you're notifying law enforcement about you having a gun, you have to provide reasonable cooperation with law enforcement about having a gun so that they don't shoot you. And as long as you're abiding by the laws, then you're able to do what you got to do with that. And then you could travel with your firearms. When it comes down to you coming to America, if you tell America you're coming to America and then you request citizenship or you request a green card or something to that effect, they give it to you and then you come. You can get a work visa. You can get a education visa. There's plenty of ways that you can get here. You can get a marriage visa. So there's no reason why you can't come here. And after you there's no reason why you can't come here first and then get citizenship before you get here, or come here after you get here and get citizenship after you got here, because the laws are so flexible at this point that you don't necessarily have to get approved to get here. You just got to get here. They're letting convicts come in. They're letting convicted felons come into the country. They don't even deport the convicted felons we already have, but they let convicted felons come here. And that's really the ideology of our American population, because we started as a melting pot of rejects from other countries. That's how the United States started. The United States started as a country full of rejects, people who were kicked out of other countries because of atrocious crimes, because those countries enforce exile. And then they had people who fled the death penalty when they were unable to pay their debts, and their lives were supposed to be executed for unpaying those debts. They fled from their debt. So you come to America and then you start over. So I'm not disappointed that we have convicts and felons coming over to our country, but I just feel like, if you're using that to try to derail the show, like, that's actually a pretty good statement to make about your should you turn yourself in. Yeah. The right thing to say is, yeah, go ahead, turn yourself in. But just understand that ISIS right now has firsthand on you. They're going to be prepping you for deportation. So just remember, when you do turn yourself in, say, hey, I kind of would like some asylum before you guys kick me out of the country, and see what they do. Yeah, you try to throw that joke up there before. I'm not interested in that one. And the 500, we're not interested in that one. And I understand that you like to do that. That's good for you. I'm not really entertained by that. And let's see. He said food. She didn't do any of that though. All right, hold on. I'm gonna put that up there. You earn that. I'm gonna put that up there. He said something appropriate, so I had to put that up there. So he says, "Thank you, Kamala, for giving me family free rent and food stamps, and my family can vote because we are in California and we don't need an ID anymore to vote. Yay, thank you, Kamala Harris." He says that, and then he says, "Thank you, Biden administration." So the appropriate response would be, yeah, thank you, Biden administration, because the Biden administration did that. Kamala had nothing to do with that, because Kamala doesn't make decisions. Biden makes decisions. The Congress makes decisions. Kamala doesn't make decisions as a vice president. Kamala is a stand-in for the president. If something happens to the president, Kamala is the next president. So if Biden stops breathing before his term is up, the only job Kamala has is to take over for Biden. And I do also believe that she is the chief of staff on the Congress. So she would be the person that is the judge or organizer for the Congress deliberations. That's pretty much it. That's pretty much it. So she just drops a hammer and says approved or denied based on the popular vote of the room, and she just waits for somebody else to lose their life for her to get promoted. So she really did not give you guys anything. But her current campaign is that she will continue to give individuals who came here illegally some type of refugee status, where you guys will receive benefits that they won't even give the American homeless people. And then they're going to then if you don't get citizenship, they're going to aid you in finding a job and kick you back out of the country. All of it is a waste of tax dollars, because I believe that while you don't necessarily need to be a citizen to be here, to claim citizenship to be here, you have to claim citizenship in order to get benefits as a citizen. So I don't believe that it's a good idea to uh, I don't think that it's a good idea to have individuals that will not contribute to the scenario uh, benefiting from the scenario. But if they're going to work here and they're not going to claim citizenship, so they're not going to be protected by the work labor laws for American citizens, and you're going to work for $7 an hour or $5 or $4 an hour picking grapes in a field so that I can get my bag of grapes for $1.20, yeah, they can get benefits because you're being taxed on everything that you spent your money on. Yeah, I have no problem with you guys getting stuff because you're not going to get any tax credits. You're not going to be able to file taxes because you're not an American citizen. You're just going to pay taxes on what you buy, and that money's going to stimulate the economy. I have no problem with that part. He says, I got to kind of screen some of these comments, y'all, because these comments are not always on the up and up. He says something about, yeah, not talking about any of those countries, and immigrants are more help the veterans and victims of the hurricane. Oh, they gave 8.7 billion, $156 million to different nationalities, more than they did the veterans and victims of the hurricane. They don't give the veterans much of it. You know how many homeless people are veterans in the United States? There's a lot of them that are homeless veterans, people who have honorable discharge now, not the ones that were deserters or people who defected or people who were accused of treason in some way, shape, or form. These are American citizens that put their time into our country in some way, shape, or form, and they came back and they've been honorably discharged. They have right to full benefits, and they're sleeping outside of a Walmart and holding up a sign, playing a guitar, hoping that you'll give them $1 as you leave the Walmart. It's terrible. It's terrible. We spend so much time and money on giving athletes millions of dollars a year for them to entertain us, but the people who defend our country can't get a few $100,000 a year to live after they've gone through years, decades, generations of putting their lives on the line for us to have the freedom to be reckless on this podcast. I don't understand why we do that. But now back to the other controversial stuff that I was talking about. I was talking about what year was Jesus born? So I told you before that they were talking about BC, between 4 BC and 6 BC. Now, the reason why that they're assuming that Jesus was born between 4 BC and 6 BC is because the exact day and month is not stated in the Bible or any historical sources. So December 25th was not established as a date to celebrate Jesus's birthday until several centuries after his lifetime had expired, which is very interesting. And some early Christian writers like Hippolytus in 170 to 120-35 CE mentioned December 25th as Jesus' birthday in a 3rd century statement. But the selection of the 25th may have been based on the calculation from assumed date of Jesus's conception of March 25th and efforts to align with existing pagan winter festivals and theological reasoning about the winter solstice. Biblical clues has suggested Jesus may have been born in autumn rather than winter. Now, autumn is the summertime or the fall, which is closer to August or September, not in winter. And the biblical clues, because it was supposed to be a clear night sky, so you're not dealing with snow. It wasn't cold because they were supposed to be in this stable full of hay, and you were able to see the stars and the 3 stars with the wise men and the Bethlehem journey and the gifts to the one and only God. All of that stuff leads to either spring or fall, unless it was extremely hot in the winter. Now, the shepherds were in the fields, and that's not common in the winter. So the shepherds that were traveling to show him respects is not necessarily something that happens in the wintertime. And then the Roman census would likely not have been conducted in the wintertime. The Roman census would have been done either in the spring or in the fall. And you also have to look at the historical events that is mentioned in the gospel, where many scholars estimate Jesus was born between 6 and 4 BC, because some research has proposed, they're just suggesting that he may have been born in early fall, possibly September or October. Nowhere near Christmas now. So before All Saints Day, before Good Friday, Ash Wednesday, somewhere in that area, he was born when it was not cold. Now, the expectation of this is that the King Herod's reign, the Gospel of Matthew states that Jesus was born during the reign of King Herod. Now, historic records indicate that King Herod died around 4 BC, which is 4 years before the day they claimed that Jesus was born. And Jesus must have been born already before King Herod died, placing his birth no later than 4 BC, but it could have been 6 BC. And 6 years before he dies would make him 6 years old when they found him. Now, remember the story, because for those of us that have the baby in the manger, in the stables, and the animals and the 3 wise men little decoration in your Christmas decorations, the story that is tied to that is that these guys look up at the sky for some reason, get some kind of inkling that the Savior has been born. Then they go on a journey where they are supposed to find this Savior and then pay tribute to the Savior. So 3 men are allegedly supposed to jump on camels, and then they are supposed to ride through Egypt, because everything happened in Egypt, and they're supposed to ride through Egypt until they find a baby out of place, and that's their Savior. Allegedly, according to the way they're rolling this thing out, it took them 4 to 6 years to find the baby before they're like, oh, this is the Savior we were looking for, right? Now, that means that the day that he was born is not the day that he was found. And 4 to 6 BC dictates that he was 4 to 6 years old when they found him. And then the 1 AD was the year that they found him, not the day that he was born, the year that he was born. So even though it is supposed to be the year of the Lord, AD is supposed to be the year of the Lord, it's not the year of the Lord, it's the year that we celebrate the Lord, because he wasn't born that year. He was found that year. So since he was found that year, and then nobody knows how old he is, they're just going to say, oh, well, we're just going to make his birthday December 25th. Ridiculous. But that's what happened. Now, the census of Quirinus, the Gospel of Luke is going to mention the census at the time of Jesus's birth, and historical evidence suggests that censuses occurred around 4 to 6 year BC, which was 4 to 6 years before they found him. Now, astronomical events where some scholars associated the Star of Bethlehem that was told in the story with celestial events that occurred between 2 and 7 BC, because the location of the Star of Bethlehem in the sky would have been seen in the sky between 2 and 7 BC. And if somebody followed that Star of Bethlehem to where the baby was, where the star would ideally be shining down on this location where this baby was, that would be the situation where you would have a holy magoli, it's here kind of thing. Now, the interesting part is that Jesus's age at the start of his ministry, when he was, and ministry is when you're out there doing stuff for the poor people. That's a ministry. And Luke states that Jesus was about 30 years old when he began the ministry. So for those of you who are not yet 30 years old, you got to understand that when lifespans were not that long, this guy was in his 30s when he started doing what he was doing. And if the ministry started around 27 to 29 AD, counting backwards 30 years places his birth around 4 to 2 BC, because it was 27 to 29 years after they found him. See what I'm saying? And that means that he was born 4 to 2 years before they found him. Baby still in diapers and shawls. Scholarly census, the most biblical scholars and historians consider all available evidence placing his birth between 4 and 6, because you've got between 2 and 4. Well, you got between 2 and 7 and between 4 and 6. So between 4 and 6 is still between 2 and 7. And if you're saying that more than likely it's probably 4, but give or take a year or two, it's either 2 or 6. You're saying between 4 and 6, he should have been approximately 4 when they found him, right? Now, the discrepancies with the current calendar is one of the reasons why they really don't know when he existed. They're coming out of our current calendar, which uses AD, dating when he was discovered, and that was created far later, and it's miscalculated the actual year of his birth, specifically because he just don't know when he was born. So if you look at the fact that he was actually born 4 to 6 years before they found him, then you would understand that, first of all, nobody's traveling in the winter. Second of all, if it took them 2 to 4 years to find him, they didn't show up on the day of his birth. So the Bethlehem story of the baby in the manger is it could be a factual story, but it's a fictitious story to be placed during Christmas because it wasn't snowing at the time. So they just manipulated the timeline because nobody really knows what the truth is. Nobody cares, and everybody believes what they're told, which was how back in the Roman days and Colosseum days that the church ruled the country, because the church was more respected with religion and knowledge. And since the knowledge was primarily with the church, the church was right next to politics. So if you were a leader, you were able to run the country because people did what they were told because they followed their leadership. And if they didn't follow their leadership, they followed the church. So the less knowledgeable just believe what they were told. That's kind of how we get conquered by the Christian religion, and then everything becomes Christianized, or the Catholic religion and everything becomes Christianized, and then we're sitting here looking at a far misconception from the original design. Now, one of the things I thought was very interesting was the calendar. Let me before I get into this calendar, let me just kind of segue in and see if he said anything appropriate this time around. Nothing there, nothing there. Something about his uncle. Yeah. And then we've got well, they didn't help anybody. They didn't help anybody with Katrina. They're not really going to do much for people in California and Colorado. So, that's kind of how the country is. He's talking about BlackRock. I am not about to get into those guys. I know that Mr. Pibbs tried to talk about BlackRock one time, and that's kind of when, yeah. Now you see Mr. Pibbs isn't here anymore. It said 3 men ride through Egypt. Yeah, they did. Oh, no, bro. No, I respond to your comments if I choose to. I am not required to respond to your comments. What are my thoughts about BlackRock? I don't know anything about BlackRock. I know that Mr. Pibbs talked to me about BlackRock, and Mr. Pibbs is no longer here. So if that's how it works, that's how BlackRock operates. So before I disappear, I'm not going to talk about BlackRock. So when it comes down to calendars, we're looking at the earliest calendars that were dated back in the Bronze Age. And you're just going to have to look at your history. But with the Bronze Age, with civilization in the Near East, like Babylonians and Persians being amongst the first to record time, you're looking at Sumerian calendars dating around 3100 BC, are considered the oldest known calendars, which is 3,100 years before they found Jesus. Now, the natural cycles in the early calendars were based on natural cycles, including days, uh, linear cycles. So days was like the sun going up, the sun going down. Lunar cycles was the different phases of the moon, and solar cycles was the different phases of the sun. And those dictated days, months, and years. Initially, Milli calendars were lunar based because it was easier to follow the phases of the moon than it was to observe and measure the phases of the sun. Now, Egyptians had credit, they're credited with making all months and even 30 days, not some being 31, some being 30, some being 29. They were all 30 days, moving away from the lunar cycles to align with the solar year. They introduced the concept of a leap year every 4 years. Now, the interesting part about that is that because they basically ended up with 365.25 days, so 365 days and 6 hours, coming from the perspective of 24 hours in a day. But before they had 24 hours in a day, we're going to talk about how much time we really had back in those days. So Roman calendars came out. Now, remember, we're talking about 3100 BC at first. Then we started going into the Roman calendars, where Julius Caesar oversees the creation of the Julian calendar in 45 BC, which is closer to when Jesus was born, which is probably like 3000 uh 3055 years after they had the original Egyptian calendars. And this calendar is the one that turned into the one that we're using today. The Georgian calendar in 1582, which is 1582 AD, the Pope George the 13th introduced the Georgian calendar, which refined the Julian calendar. So again, the Catholic Church took over pagan stuff, and this calendar, most widely used today for civilian purposes, is based on their design. Now, the early Roman calendar originally had 10 months, starting in March and ending in December. Now, remember, we were talking about when Jesus was supposed to be found. He was supposed to be found during the year, not during the cold year. March was when it wasn't cold, so he would have been ideally born in March or born in the fall between September and October, close to the summer solstice, right before wintertime happens. Then the winter period, roughly January and February, was not initially accounted for. So we started getting cold in November, and it would stay cold in December and sometimes be cold in January. And we would all complain about how the planet's alignments is shifting, and now it is cold in December and January and February, and it's starting to lead into being cold in only January, February, and March. You take into accountability that the planet has rotated so many times that it is starting to go back to the original setting, where January and February is winter, when December and January used to be winter. But the start of winter is in November. So everything wraps itself up on October 31st, and between November and February, it's cold. So based on the search results, you're looking at the historical design. The Roman calendar only acknowledged 304 days, the 10 months. Now, if they're 10 months and 304 days, you divide that up and you're getting what? 30 days a month plus 4 extra days. It's weird. Now, the calendar being attributed to Romulus, the legendary first ruler of Rome, was said to have introduced this in the 700s BCE, before Christ era. They had the 10 months that were named Martus, Aprilius, Maius, Junius, and Quintilius, Sextilius, and then you had September, October, November, which was normal. So the last 6 were derived from the Latin words for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, reflecting their position in the original 10-month calendar. The calendar ignoring the remaining 61 days, which fell in the middle of winter, not the start of winter. And each month was still alternating between 30 and 31 days, where 6 months were 30 days and 4 months were 31 days. And later, around 1713 BCE, Numia Pompilius, the second king of Rome, was said to have added 2 more months, January and February, to fill the winter gap, bringing the total to 12 months. Now, there was originally the idea that there was supposed to be like 13 months in a calendar, but they dropped the 13th month because 13 is an unlucky number. Now, the 10-month calendar was the foundation of the Roman calendar system, which eventually evolved into the Julian and later Georgian calendars that we use today. So the Egyptians had one of the earliest recognized 365-day solar year setup. So in the biblical era, when Jesus was supposed to be born, there was allegedly supposed to be 365 days. They divided it into 12 months of 30 days plus the 5 extra days. So technically you had 12 30-day months and 5 extra days, which would ideally be a 13th month. Now, you could really divide this up evenly, where you divide 365 days by 13, and you would have a very interesting number there. But just understand that you're looking at 12 months plus 5 days, which is ideally 13 months. And then they're going to do away with those 5 days, or not do away with it, but merge it in and have like 31 days, some days, 30 days, some days, and have a 28th day on February, where once every 4 years, February becomes a 29th day, where you have 366 days on a leap year, and then 365 days every other year, where 2 out of 4 years, your timing is off. So the calendar is off. So when Jesus was born was off. And that's one of the sole reasons why we're talking about this right now. Hold on, guys. Let me before I start getting into this Julian calendar, we're going to talk about what he's got going on. And then what are your no, you asked those questions again. I'm not going to talk about those. So Julian calendar. We talked about how he had introduced it, but he defined it as 325 days out of the year, but he had a concept of the leap year every 4 years. The Mayan calendar that a lot of people talk about back in the day was also recognizing the same 365 days in a year, but it divided it into 18 months of 20 days plus 5 extra days at the end. So the 18 months still had 18 months and 5 days, which is almost like 20 months. 19 months, but you had 18 months and 5 days, 18 months and 20 days with 5 extra days in there. I don't understand why you can't get an even number out of this, where you just have an even distribution of days. But for some reason, they did 20-day months. But 20-day months is easier to follow because it's exactly 20 days every month. And then they had to play catch up. So the ancient Sumerian calendar around 2100 BC was also based off of that lunar calendar with 354 days in a year, and the extra months were added periodically to align with the solar year. So they still play catch up too. So they also had a leap year to kind of leap them back into place. And the ancient Ephesian calendar was also using a 354-day year and based on the lunar months, and they added extra months every few years to align with the solar year. Now, one of the reasons why they had these calendars where there were so many months not included was because those were the months where everything was cold. Nobody was doing anything when it was cold. Everybody stayed in their houses. But you had etymology, which is the term calendar, where the term calendar comes from the Latin calendarium, meaning account book or register. And this is related to calendus, the first day of the month in the Roman calendar. Now, you're going to love this, because when you think about a calendar and then you think about back in the day, way, way, way back in the day, guess what an account book or a register is? The calendar is a record keeping book. It serves as a public record book or private accounting book for keeping official written accounts regularly. This means that they were documenting what people had did and who when they did it, and they would put people and their assets in a registry. This has gone all the way back to the 13th century, and medieval Latin registrium, meaning list matters recorded. They kept documentation. The church kept a lot of documentations, which is one of the reasons why they were respected, because they had all the knowledge, because they had all of the records. Now, the record trading was the accounting book, the account book, i.e., calendar. So the recording trades and transactions. This was in ancient Mesopotamia around 7,500 BC, and this was a clay objects that were used to keep account for goods, representing quantities of commodities like food, clothing, and labor, which is then later spoke about in the Bible after Jesus was born, because the notation of time and the recording of dates and events was their ability to record their assets and their resources, and who had access to them, who traded with who bought what, who sold what, and I'm going to say that, hypothetically speaking, that credibility was developed from that, who could be trusted to trade with and who could not be trusted to trade with. you know early lodgers recorded details of trades made under the barter system, describing exchanges of goods and services. That's where your credit comes from. Anybody that you could barter with and not be mistreated, you had good credit, had good credibility. Anybody who was a swindler had bad credibility. They would have to pay up front. Tracking personal wealth, the affluent members of society used account books to record what they owned, and what they owned was who owned it. Not so much like, so I know that that's kind of like they recorded what they owned, and who owned what was also recorded with what they owned. And I know that that's kind of like a conundrum, but it's like, for example, if I owned a car or a horse and buggy in that time frame, and then I owned the business that owned the car, and I owned the person that owned the business that owned the car. When you start dealing with slavery and all of that stuff was documented by the affluent. Then you had the and that's strange because we now consider poor people affluent, but affluent was supposed to be, I'm guessing, recognizing the rich. So affluent, recognizing the rich, and impoverished is the poor. Man, you got to start looking at your legal terms. So over 5,000 years ago, the Egyptian bookkeeping kept detailed records of the royal inventory, and then governmental royal accounting turned into the ruling entities like royal families, and governments used account books to record the demand of taxes, and then they would be able to dictate whether or not certain cities inside of their control were paying enough taxes to the king, which gave the king enough ability to keep track of how much resources he had, so that he could buy, sell, and trade with other kingdoms, which this was the foundational development of e-commerce. What does this have to do with Jesus in the manger? Well, why the hell else are we wasting all this money on buying each other gifts and shit when Jesus was born in either March or October, and we're spending all this money on Christmas in the name of Jesus, supposedly? And really, it was just supposed to be, the calendar date was designed just to keep track of days. Had nothing to do with the guy being born, but I just kind of want to talk about this because I thought that this was a very interesting concept to go off of. And then in ancient Rome, Emperor Augustus created the empirical account book to plan projects to manage the empire. And then you had your commercial record keeping. And as global trade grew, merchants used account books to keep track of diverse resources and large scale commerce. So, which places that you could go to by ship to get certain resources that didn't exist in your country. And then in medieval Italy, merchants developed more sophisticated bookkeeping methods to handle complex transactions, where give me this for this, and I'll give you this for that, which I will give this to somebody else, and that person will give me something else. And that's when you have a trading post where a bunch of goods come into the trading post, it exchanges hands, where it might take 3 different people to exchange something, where one person can walk away with something that they were looking for that the first party didn't have, but the third party had, and the third party wanted something that the second party had. And that's when you started dealing with exchange rates, because there was a service fee that was put for the person to value 3 chickens to 2 cows to 8 pigs, or vice versa. Then those account books were used to plan future projects and think about how resources were managed. And the planning of future projects is where the calendar is coming from. So we're looking at the inventory management, where the early account books tracked goods and often used physical tokens to mark represent to use as marks to represent different types of quantities of items, and that's where a calculator comes from. And then the debt and credit record is the bookkeeper's recording how much people owed, how much credit you would give them. When you put it on the house, they'll pay for it later. And this was crucial for trading and commerce, because if you couldn't trust somebody to pay back their debts, you wouldn't give them anything in advance. You would expect them to give you what you are entitled to before you give them what they're asking for. But if you can give them something today and next week they can give you what you are entitled to, then you would feel privileged to the fact that they are trustworthy for you to hand them something, and then they give you something in return. Now, that was all of the information that I have for you today that led to I went through a whole spiel about where the calendar comes from. And why did I do that? I did that because, well, the 25th was just randomly selected as, we're just going to take over the winter solstice holidays, the pagan holidays, and we're going to make it about Jesus Christ. Christmas wasn't about um Christmas wasn't about Jesus Christ. The summer solstice was, I mean, the winter solstice was about celebrating the winter holidays and pagan festivals, and they made it about Jesus Christ. Jesus wasn't born on Christmas. Jesus was born when it was hot. And that means that Jesus's birthday is not during one of the coldest days out of the year. So there's no reason why anybody who is claiming to celebrate the birth of Jesus Christ is not celebrating it in Easter. So you're either celebrating the birth of Jesus Christ at Easter, or the death of Jesus Christ during Hallows Eve or All Hallows month. So there's no reason why Jesus should be in anything other than Easter or Halloween. So Christmas should not be about Jesus Christ, but it is. And Halloween is not about satanic worshiping of devils. It's about paying tribute to the people who have passed on, honoring your heritage and stuff to that effect. That also a pagan holiday that got absorbed by the church and became all about the religious stuff. So Christianity basically conquered all of the pagan traditions and then made it all about Jesus Christ, who, by the way, was created 4,000-5,000 BC after the church. Think about that for a second. 3,000-4,000 years after the church was created, was supposed to be the savior of the church, and then they did egregious things to him, put him up on a stack of wood and took him out, and then they start a calendar after after the year they found him. And how long did he live? Because I mean, he started his commute at 30. He probably made it to about 34, 35, and then he was hanging from the rafters. But they're then going to celebrate his life during the winter solstice every year, when, truth be told, they should be celebrating his life during the All Saints Day or All Hallows Eve. Because if he was martyred for what he did, he shouldn't have his day on Christmas. He should have his day on Halloween. Now, that is all I have for you for today, because I thought that was a very interesting concept. I thought that was, and I got to see how these shorts are going to play out, because we talked about a lot of stuff. But, on this, that, and everything in between, we always talk about this, that, and everything in between. So I really appreciate you guys coming to tonight's show. And like I said, I'm going to figure out what's going on with TikTok. if I can get what I'm trying to get, because really I need a source key. If I can get that, then we'll be good to go. Because once I get the source key, I can throw the source key in here, and then I can just and then we've got all three of y'all in the same place at the same time, and then we can start communicating with one another. So I'm going to try to figure that part out. Like I said before, make sure that you guys hang out, come see us, because we got something for you guys every day of the week. Tomorrow we're going to be talking about stocks. What are they? What do you got to look for with them? Expectations on how to trade with them. So I'm going to try to put some stuff together. I cannot tell you what to buy and what not to buy, because Google's not going to let me do that. There are probably some laws against that, but I am going to be able to tell you what a good stock looks like, what a bad stock looks like, what a stock looks like, the difference between calls and puts, the difference between covered calls and uncovered calls, covered puts and uncovered puts, and how to buy and sell. And then what you have to qualify for to be able to make covered calls and covered puts, because they have certain criteria for trading platforms to allow you to make a unprotected call or an unprotected put. And that's one of the things that we kind of want to talk about when you guys hear those gurus that want, or those self-proclaimed gurus that want to tell you, oh yeah, you could make $250 in 2 seconds just by clicking this button and doing that. But what they fail to tell you is how did this person do what he or she did to get to this point? And that's the part that they don't talk about. So you today can start trading today, and you're not going to be able to quickly access those cover calls, those uncovered calls and uncovered puts to make instantaneous trades against the market, like talking about it. And that's what I'm going to be talking to you guys about tomorrow on the show. So all of those people who are telling you sign up for their training class because they're going to show you how to trade. Yeah, I'm going to show you how. They're going to get a lot of money to tell you about like things you could potentially invest in and possibly make some money in. But guess what? You're not going to be able to do. You're not going to be able to do uncovered calls and puts the way they're doing uncovered calls and puts, because you have to trade a lot before you can get that skill set in. And one of the places like TD Ameritrade asks you to trade like 200 or 300, well, almost 400 trades, which means you have to buy and or sell 300 to 400 times before they allow you to be able to do uncovered calls and uncovered puts. And if you buy and or sell 300 to 400 times, then and in addition to that, you have to have the assets in the account to cover the trade. If the trade flops, then they will allow you to do the uncovered calls and uncovered puts, because if in the event that the deal doesn't go the way you want it to go, then they will put you that you gotta compensate the trade. They have a certain percentage that they will compensate on your behalf, but you still got to compensate for the rest of the trade. So you got to make sure that you have the money in your account to do those trades. They may qualify you to do uncovered calls and uncovered puts if you put several $100,000 into a stock option to do those uncovered calls and uncovered puts, but they're not going to be able to, they're not going to let you do it if you have no money in the bank. You can't offer to buy a transaction that you don't have access to, and you can't offer to sell a transaction that you don't have access to. That's how that works. So as I walk out the door, let me go ahead and take a look at some of the things that he's got going on here. He's going to ask about Ohio. Okay, so when it comes down to those individuals, anybody who is considered an American citizen deserves a right to vote. And then since they're giving people who are not American citizens the right to vote, if they're giving you the right to vote, then you have the right to vote. But I believe that anybody who's at least an American citizen should be able to dictate what happens in this country, regardless of your choice. And then you're going to ask me about you're going to ask me if in the event that the dude deserves to be released. I'm going to tell you it does not matter, because the things that people do behind closed doors, especially if the things that they do involve violating crimes, requires them to receive negative judgment. If in the event that they were participating with unwilling participants, then they are supposed to deal with that as well. You're going to ask me about should the guy be let out, but on what, house arrest? The thing is that the dude's got a mansion, so it's not a house, it's a city. Because he's got what, 52 to 100 bedrooms in his house. Like you put him on house arrest, he ain't really suffering. So like the same way OJ was out there. So it doesn't really matter about that. And then you're gonna ask me, oh, well, that's good. That's good. You can enjoy that. Technically that's exactly what you're doing when you're trading Pokemon cards, but hey, people don't really think about that. And then you ask me, do I like the guy's music? Hey, I don't really know. I think he made two songs that I actually really liked. That was him, not just him having one verse on it where he kind of like was in the background and somebody else was doing it. So, kind of got I can't really say that I know of a lot of music that he soloed on the music. And then you're gonna ask me, do I like rap music and hip hop? I am a fan of all music, so it doesn't really matter what kind of music it is. I favor some more than others. I do like more soul music. That they probably would classify that as R&B music these days. I'm okay with the upbeat music, but the modern day upbeat music that is identified as hip hop and or rap music is more self-degrading music, and I'm not a big fan of people who are listening to the music and then classifying themselves in derogatory fashions, in line with the music, calling each other the N word in line with the music, and degrading and devaluing themselves with the music. I have no problem with adults cursing, but I mean, a chick who doesn't want to be called a bad bee should not be identifying herself as a bad bee. The females don't want to be identified as female dogs. They should not identify themselves as female dogs. Minorities who don't want to be called the N word by other people should not identify themselves or other people in the same race as the N word. So if it is inappropriate for somebody to do it to you, you should not do it to anybody else. You should not do it to yourself. I do not know what that is, but I have to wrap things up because, like I told you before, I'm going to try to see if I can commandeer TikTok's stream key so I can throw it up there, and then I can be able to stream from StreamYard where we can have better accessibility. Because if I'm not streaming off of two different platforms, as you can see, I didn't have as much signal drops because I did not have it streaming off of two different platforms. So that's what we're going to be doing for tomorrow. We're going to be working on that. I really appreciate you guys coming to This and That, where we talk about this, that, and everything in between. And ladies, as long as the situation doesn't make sense, I'm going to keep asking you to make it make sense. So, ladies, make it make